Can I ask you something without ruining everything? Ryan whispered, and in that moment, the 8 years between us suddenly felt dangerously fragile. It was 2:17 in the morning, and I was lying in a hotel room on the North Carolina coast with my straight best friend less than a foot away. Rain tapped softly against the balcony doors. Beyond the glass, the Atlantic rolled through the darkness, steady and endless, while the power outage had turned our room almost completely black. I could barely see Ryan Carter beside me, but I knew every detail of his face without needing light. I had spent 8 years learning them and 6 years pretending they meant nothing to me. What do you want to ask? I whispered. Ryan hesitated. That frightened me more than the question. Ryan never hesitated. He was the guy who ordered dinner before I opened the menu, chose the highway before the navigation app finished loading, and somehow always knew what to say when my life went sideways. But now he was staring at me like he had reached the edge of something he had never planned to cross. His hand rested near mine on the mattress. A ridiculous row of pillows separated our sides of the bed, although somewhere during the night one had fallen onto the floor. Ethan, he said quietly. Then he stopped again. My heart was beating hard enough that I was convinced he could hear it. I wanted him to finish the question. I also wanted morning to arrive before he could, because there are things you can survive by never saying them out loud. For me, Ryan had always been one of those things. 36 hours earlier, none of this seemed possible. Ryan was simply my best friend, the same guy who had been stealing fries from my plate since we were teenagers and calling me whenever something good, terrible, or completely pointless happened. I was Ethan Miller, 24 years old, professionally average at dating and exceptionally talented at being secretly in love with someone unavailable. Ryan was 25, recently single, and, as far as everyone including Ryan himself knew, completely straight. That fact had become the foundation of our friendship. I never questioned it. At least not where anyone could hear me. So when he showed up outside my apartment on Thursday evening carrying 2 coffees and wearing that familiar expression that usually meant he had already made a decision for both of us, I expected pizza or maybe another terrible movie marathon. Instead, he held out my vanilla latte with 1 extra shot and said, "Pack a bag." I stared at him. Why? We are going to the beach. We? You and me. Ryan, it is Thursday. Excellent observation. Some people have jobs. You are off tomorrow. I narrowed my eyes. How do you know that? He smiled. Because I listen when you talk. Something about the answer stayed with me. 2 weeks earlier, Ryan had broken up with Madison after almost a year together. I assumed this spontaneous trip was his way of escaping the awkward silence that followed a serious breakup. What I did not know was that Madison had left him with a question he could not stop thinking about. I did not know that the faded blue bracelet around his wrist had anything to do with me. And I definitely did not know that Ryan had chosen the ocean for a reason. I only knew my best friend was standing outside my apartment with my favorite coffee, asking me to disappear with him for a weekend. So I broke the most important rule I had made for surviving 6 years of loving Ryan Carter. I stopped thinking about what was safe, grabbed my bag, and went with him. The first hour of the drive felt exactly like every road trip Ryan and I had taken before, which made it easier to ignore the fact that something about him felt different. He controlled the playlist from the driver's seat, while I complained about his refusal to admit that music released after college could be good. He stole a handful of my barbecue chips at a gas station outside Raleigh, then defended himself by claiming road trip food belonged to everyone in the car. That is not a rule, I said. It is absolutely a rule. According to who? The Department of Transportation. I am pretty sure they are busy with actual transportation. Ryan laughed, and for a few miles I forgot that I had ever been nervous about coming. This was what made loving him so difficult. Being around Ryan was easy. It was everything I wanted from him that required effort. As the highway carried us east, the trees thinned and the sky opened wider. Ryan remembered exactly which old college song I always played on road trips. He remembered that I hated grape-flavored candy and traded me his cherry pieces without asking. When we stopped for coffee, he ordered my drink before I reached the counter. None of those things were new, but that afternoon I noticed every one of them. Maybe because Madison was gone. Maybe because there was nobody else between us for an entire weekend. Somewhere about 40 miles from the coast, I caught Ryan looking at me. What? I asked. His eyes returned to the road. Nothing. You were staring. I was checking whether you were asleep. With my eyes open? You sleep strangely. I laughed and reached for another chip. That was when I noticed the faded blue bracelet around his wrist. I recognized it immediately. I had bought it at a street festival during sophomore year for less than $10 because Ryan had joked that every friendship needed official merchandise. "You still have that?" I asked. He glanced at his wrist. "Of course. I have not seen you wear it in years. I wear it sometimes." "Why today?" His fingers tightened slightly around the steering wheel. Felt like it. Before I could ask anything else, he turned the music louder. By the time we reached the coast, the late afternoon sky had turned orange and gold. The first glimpse of the Atlantic appeared between rows of beach houses, and Ryan rolled down both windows. Salt air filled the car. "Tell me this was not a great idea," he said. "We have not even checked into the hotel. You are already happier. You are extremely confident for someone who just stole half my snacks." He smiled. "You still came with me." Our room was not ready, so we left our bags with the front desk and walked 2 blocks toward the beach. Ryan kicked off his shoes the moment we reached the sand. I kept mine on. He turned around. "Seriously? Sand gets everywhere. That is the entire point of a beach." He walked backward toward the water, grinning at me. I followed because I always followed Ryan into ridiculous ideas. A few minutes later, we were standing ankle-deep in cold surf, laughing while the sun lowered behind us. For one perfect moment, I let myself forget every rule I had created about him. Then I noticed Ryan was no longer looking at the ocean. He was looking at me, quietly, with an expression I could not read. Before I could ask what it meant, a stranger beside us smiled at me and said, "Hey, I like your shirt." Ryan looked at him, then back at me, and something in his face changed. The stranger introduced himself as Noah, and under normal circumstances I probably would have forgotten the conversation 5 minutes later. He looked about our age, friendly and relaxed, with the easy confidence of someone who had spent enough summers near the coast to feel completely at home there. "Visiting?" he asked. "Just for the weekend," I said. "Same. My friends and I drove down from Charlotte." Before I could answer, Ryan stepped closer beside me. It was subtle, maybe 6 inches, but I noticed because I noticed everything Ryan did. "We should probably get dinner," he said. I looked at him. "Already? I am starving." Noah smiled as if he had noticed something I had not. "Your boyfriend?" "No," Ryan answered immediately. The speed of it should not have bothered me. Ryan was straight. I knew that. Noah had simply asked a question, and Ryan had given the correct answer. Still, something inside me sank before I could stop it. "Best friend," I added. Noah nodded. "Good to know." Ryan turned toward him. "Why is that good to know?" I stared at Ryan. Noah laughed softly. "Because I was going to ask Ethan if he wanted my number." Ryan became very still. Oh, that single word carried more emotion than it had any right to. Noah looked at me instead. "Only if you want it." I hesitated, partly because I was surprised and partly because Ryan was suddenly standing so close that our shoulders nearly touched. "Sure," I said. Noah took my phone and entered his number. When he handed it back, Ryan was looking toward the ocean with his jaw set in that familiar way he used when something irritated him. Noah said goodbye and headed back toward a group near the boardwalk. I waited until he was far enough away before turning to Ryan. "What was that?" "What was what?" "You suddenly needed dinner like you had not eaten in 3 days." "I am hungry." "You ate half my chips." "Those were road trip chips. They do not count." I folded my arms. "Were you jealous?" Ryan actually laughed, but it sounded a little too deliberate. "Of Noah? You remember his name. He said it 30 seconds ago. You also asked why it was good that I was single." I was making conversation. "That was not conversation. That was an investigation." Ryan shook his head and started walking toward our shoes. "You are imagining things." I followed him across the sand. "Then you do not care if I call him?" He stopped, just for a second. Then he bent down to pick up his shoes. "Why would I care?" "That is what I am asking." Ryan looked at me, and the playful expression was gone. There was something else underneath it, something uncertain enough that I stopped smiling too. "I just do not know him," he said. "Neither do I. That is usually why people exchange numbers." He could be annoying. He spoke for 2 minutes. A very revealing 2 minutes. I laughed despite myself. Ryan smiled again, apparently relieved that I had let the moment become a joke. We walked toward the boardwalk, and he rested his hand briefly between my shoulder blades as we moved around a family carrying beach chairs. It was an ordinary gesture. Ryan had touched my shoulder 1,000 times. But after the way he had looked at Noah, It did not feel ordinary anymore. Back at the hotel, the clerk finally handed Ryan our room key. As we entered the elevator, he stared at the glowing floor numbers instead of me. Then, just before the doors opened, he asked, "You are not actually going to call him tonight, are you?" I turned toward him. Ryan still refused to look at me. For the first time that weekend, I stopped wondering whether I was imagining his jealousy and started wondering what it meant. The elevator doors opened onto the fourth floor before Ryan could explain why he cared whether I called Noah. He stepped into the hallway first, and I followed him past framed photographs of sailboats and quiet stretches of Carolina coastline. "You never answered me," I said. "About what?" "You know exactly what." Ryan held up the key card. "I am focused on finding our room." Convenient. Room 417 was near the end of the hallway. Ryan unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stopped so suddenly that I nearly walked into him. "What?" I asked. Then I looked past his shoulder. There was one queen-size bed in the middle of the room. Not two beds pushed together. Not a couch that could become a bed. One bed. Ryan stared at it. "That is not what I booked." I walked inside and checked the room as though another mattress might somehow be hiding behind the curtains. "Please tell me you did not accidentally reserve the honeymoon package." "I booked two beds. Maybe this is their friendship package." Ryan laughed. "You are enjoying this too much. I will enjoy it more when you explain where I am sleeping." We called the front desk, and a few minutes later the clerk apologized for a reservation error. A weekend festival had filled nearly every nearby hotel, and no room with two beds was available until the following day. They could send extra blankets and move us if something opened. I hung up and pointed toward the floor. "Problem solved. I will sleep down there." Ryan looked genuinely offended. "No, it is carpet." "Exactly. I have survived worse. Ethan, we have known each other for 8 years. I am not making you sleep on a hotel floor because we have to share a mattress for one night." My pulse immediately became less cooperative. "You steal blankets. That is your objection?" "It is a serious character flaw. I stole one blanket in Chicago. And Nashville. That blanket was barely large enough for one person. And during the snowstorm at your apartment." Ryan paused. "Fine. I have a history." By the time extra pillows arrived, we had created what Ryan called an international boundary down the center of the bed. "Cross this line," I told him, "and there will be consequences." Should I contact an embassy? Immediately. The absurdity helped. We ordered burgers, watched television, and argued about which movie deserved to be called the worst thing we had ever seen together. For an hour, the room felt normal because we made it normal. Then the weather changed. Wind pushed rain against the balcony doors, and distant thunder rolled over the Atlantic. The television flickered. "That does not look promising," Ryan said. The lights went out a second later. The room became completely dark. "You had to say it." Clearly, I control the electrical grid. Our phones still worked, but both batteries were low, so we turned them off to save power. Without the television, music, or glowing screens, the room became strangely quiet. We lay on opposite sides of the bed while rain tapped against the glass and waves sounded faintly beyond the balcony. I could hear Ryan breathing on the other side of the pillow barrier. Then the mattress shifted. "Ethan," he said. "Yeah. Can I ask you something without ruining everything?" My entire body went still. I recognized the moment before I understood why. Somewhere on the nightstand, the battery-powered travel clock read 2:17 in the morning. Ryan turned toward me in the darkness, and suddenly we had arrived at the question I had been afraid of since this trip began. "What did you want to ask?" I whispered. Ryan did not answer immediately. The darkness made every second feel longer, and without the usual distractions, I could hear the rain, the distant ocean, and the quiet rhythm of his breathing. "Have you ever been in love?" he finally asked. Of all the questions I had prepared myself for, that was not one of them. That is what might ruin everything. Just answer. I stared toward the ceiling even though I could barely see it. There were easy ways out. I could make a joke. I could say no. I could remind him that it was after 2 in the morning and suggest we sleep. Instead, I said, "Yeah." The mattress shifted slightly. "Seriously? Why does that surprise you?" "Because you never told me." There was nothing to tell. Who was he? My chest tightened. Someone unavailable. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Did he know? No. Why not? I swallowed. Because sometimes telling the truth does not just give you a chance to gain something. It gives you a chance to lose something too. The rain softened outside. Ryan turned onto his side, facing me. You thought he would leave? I thought things would change. Maybe they would have changed in a good way. I almost laughed. You are unusually optimistic about a stranger. I am trying to understand. Why? Another silence. Because I think I have spent a long time not understanding something. That answer made me turn toward him. My eyes had adjusted enough to make out his expression. He looked uncertain, almost frustrated with himself. Is this about Madison? I asked. Not exactly. Then what? Ryan exhaled slowly. Today, when Noah gave you his number, I hated it. I waited. You already made that obvious. I know, but I cannot explain why. You said you were protective. That was an excuse. My heartbeat quickened. Ryan continued, his voice lower now. I kept thinking about you calling him, going out with him, maybe liking him. Those are normal things for me to do. I know. Then why does it bother you? That is what I am trying to figure out. His honesty frightened me more than denial would have. I could handle Ryan believing he was jealous because he was protective. I did not know what to do with Ryan questioning the explanation himself. His hand moved across the mattress and stopped beside the pillow between us. Does he know you are talking about him right now? He asked. My breath caught. No. Would you tell him if you knew he would not leave? I could not answer. The pillow between us shifted when Ryan moved closer, then slipped onto the floor. Neither of us reached for it. His fingers brushed mine. It was barely a touch, but neither of us pulled away. Ethan, he said. Yeah. His hand settled gently over mine. Does this bother you? No. The word came out almost soundless. Good. He moved closer again, slowly enough that I could have stopped him. I did not. His eyes held mine, then dropped for a moment before returning to my face. I knew what I thought was happening, but 6 years of protecting myself refused to trust it. Ryan, I whispered. Tell me to move back. I should have. Instead, I stayed still. The distance between us narrowed until there was almost nothing left to hide behind. Then every light in the room came on at once. The television restarted. The air conditioner hummed. Ryan blinked against the sudden brightness and pulled back. Power is back, he said quietly. Yeah. He turned away, leaving an empty space between us where the pillows had been. We should sleep. I stared at the clock as it changed from 2:17 to 2:18, wondering how 60 seconds could leave two people exactly where they started and somehow change everything. Morning arrived far too quickly, and Ryan acted as if nothing unusual had happened. By 8:30, sunlight filled the hotel room. The storm had moved offshore, and Ryan was standing near the window, checking the weather on his phone, while I pretended to be interested in tying my shoes. The fallen pillow still sat on the floor between our sides of the bed, a ridiculous reminder of the 60 seconds neither of us seemed willing to mention. Breakfast? Ryan asked. Sure. That was it. No conversation about his hand over mine. No explanation for the way he had moved closer. No acknowledgement that we had almost crossed a line neither of us could uncross. We walked to a small cafe near the boardwalk, where the streets were still wet from the storm and the morning smelled like coffee and salt air. Ryan ordered waffles. I ordered eggs and spent most of breakfast watching him behave completely normally. Finally, he lowered his coffee. You are quiet. I am tired. You always say that when something is bothering you. I almost laughed. Maybe I did not sleep well. His eyes met mine. For 1 second, the night before returned between us. Then he looked away. Before either of us could speak, someone called my name. Noah stood near the counter holding an iced coffee. Hey, he said, walking over. I was wondering if I would see you again. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Small town. Noah smiled politely at him, then looked at me. A few friends and I are getting drinks near the pier tonight. You should come. I hesitated. I did not particularly want to go, but I wanted Ryan to react. That realization should have stopped me. It did not. Sure, I said. Ryan looked at me. Immediately. We have plans. Do we? I thought we did. You never mentioned them. Noah glanced between us, clearly sensing something complicated. No pressure. I will text you the address. After he left, I folded my arms. You cannot keep doing that. Ryan frowned. Doing what? Acting like you get a vote every time someone is interested in me. I was not voting. You answered for me yesterday, and you almost did it again today. Fine. Go out with him. That is not the point. Then what is the point, Ethan? I stared at him. 8 years of carefully avoiding this conversation suddenly felt exhausting. You held my hand last night. Ryan went completely still. I remember. You moved closer to me. I remember that too. And now you are sitting here pretending it meant nothing. I am not pretending. Then tell me what it meant. Ryan opened his mouth, but no answer came. I nodded slowly. Exactly. I am trying to figure this out. And what am I supposed to do while you figure it out? Wait around while you pull me closer at night and act like everything is normal in the morning. His expression tightened. I never meant to hurt you. I know. That does not make this easier. I stood and reached for my coffee. Ryan looked up at me. Where are you going? For a walk. Ethan. I stopped. His voice had changed. The confidence was gone. Do not go with Noah tonight. Hope rose inside me before I could stop it. I turned back. Give me one reason. Ryan looked at me, and I could see the answer somewhere behind his eyes. But he could not say it. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. I nodded, more disappointed than angry. That is what I thought. I walked out into the bright Carolina morning alone, finally understanding that the hardest part was not loving someone who believed he was straight. It was realizing he might feel something too and still be too afraid to name it. I walked until the cafe was almost 2 miles behind me, following the boardwalk until the shops and families gave way to a quieter stretch near the pier. The storm had washed the morning clean, leaving a bright blue sky over the Atlantic and small pools of rainwater shining between the wooden boards. My phone buzzed 3 times in my pocket. I knew who it was without looking. Ryan always called when I was upset, which was almost funny considering he was the reason I needed space. I finally sat on a bench facing the ocean and checked my messages. The first said, "Where are you?" The second said, "I am sorry." The third was simpler. "Please talk to me." I stared at those words until another message appeared. This one from Noah with the address of the place near the pier. He seemed nice, but the idea of meeting him suddenly felt unfair. Noah was not a solution to Ryan. He was not proof that I could move on. He was simply a stranger who had shown interest at the worst possible time. I started typing a polite message declining his invitation when I heard footsteps behind me. You walk ridiculously fast when you are angry. I closed my eyes. How did you find me? Ryan stopped several feet away. You always go toward water when you need to think. We are surrounded by ocean. That helped. Normally I would have laughed. This time I did not. Ryan sat at the opposite end of the bench, leaving enough space between us to make the distance feel intentional. You were right, he said. About what? I cannot ask you to wait while I avoid answering you. I looked at him. His usual confidence was gone. He rubbed his thumb across the faded blue bracelet on his wrist. This trip was not about Madison. Then what was it about? He looked toward the ocean. Do you remember sophomore year, when the fire alarm in our dorm kept going off and we sat outside until almost 2 in the morning? The memory came back slowly. We had been exhausted, talking about the future because neither of us could sleep. Kind of. You told me something that night. Ryan turned toward me. You said if someone ever really loved you, you did not want some huge romantic gesture. You wanted him to take you to the ocean for a weekend. Somewhere quiet, where you could hear the waves. I stared at him. I had forgotten saying it. That was 6 years ago. I know. You remembered? Ryan looked down at the bracelet. I remember more about you than I realized. Suddenly the weekend felt different. The coffee, the bracelet, the beach. The way he had planned everything without explaining why. Why now? I asked. Ryan took a slow breath. Because Madison said something before we broke up, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. What did she say? He hesitated. She said every woman I date eventually realizes she is competing with you. The ocean seemed louder behind us. That is ridiculous. That is exactly what I told her. Ryan, I never interfered with your relationships. She was not blaming you. His eyes met mine. She was talking about me. I stopped breathing for a second. Ryan stood and faced the water, then looked back at me. She asked who I call first when something good happens. You. Who I want around when everything goes wrong. You. Who knows what I am thinking before I say it. You. His voice softened. Then she asked me why I kept building relationships where someone else was always expected to come second to my best friend. I did not know what to say. Ryan took one careful step closer. I brought you here because I needed to understand why you have always been the person I choose first. He glanced at the ocean, then back at me. And because 6 years ago, when you told me what being loved would look like to you, apparently some part of me decided it was important enough to remember. For several seconds, I could not think of anything to say. Ryan had remembered a conversation I had forgotten, carried it for 6 years, and somehow turned it into this weekend, without fully understanding why. You brought me here because of something I said when we were 19? I asked. Not only because of that. He looked nervous now, which was almost unsettling. Ryan was rarely nervous. After Madison said those things, I started looking backward. Every relationship, every important decision, every time something happened, and I automatically reached for my phone. To call me. Always you. I looked toward the water because looking directly at him felt too difficult. That does not necessarily mean what you think it means. I know. His answer came gently. That is why I have been confused. He moved closer, but left enough distance for me to decide whether I wanted him there. I have spent my whole life thinking I understood this part of myself. I dated women. I cared about them. I never questioned that. Then Madison asked me why every relationship eventually had the same problem, and I realized the problem was not them. It was me. No. Ryan shook his head immediately. It was that I kept giving you a place in my life that nobody else could reach. My throat tightened. He continued before I could respond. Then Noah showed up yesterday, and suddenly the idea of someone else getting that place made me miserable. Last night I held your hand, and I stopped trying to explain it away. Until morning. Ryan looked down. Until morning. There was no defense in his voice, only regret. I got scared, Ethan. Not of you. Not of what almost happened. I got scared because I realized I wanted it to happen, and I did not know what that meant about everything I thought I knew. That was the sentence that finally broke through 6 years of caution. The person I told you about last night, I said. Ryan became still. The one who does not know? Yeah. I forced myself to meet his eyes. It is you. His expression changed so completely that I almost looked away. Me? You? How long? I gave a small, helpless laugh. Since sophomore year. Ryan stared at me. 6 years. Approximately 6 years, 3 months, but counting makes it sound unhealthy. A surprised laugh escaped him, then faded when he realized I was serious. Why did you never tell me? Because you were straight, Ryan. Because you were my best friend. Because having you in my life felt better than risking everything for something I believed could never happen. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, equal parts sadness and wonder. I wish I could tell you exactly what label fits me now. You do not have to. But I need you to know I am not treating this like an experiment. He stepped closer. I do not suddenly have every answer because we shared one strange night in a hotel room. I just know that when I imagine going home and pretending none of this happened, that feels wrong. My eyes burned with emotion, but I smiled. So what feels right? Ryan looked down at our hands. Slowly, carefully, he reached for mine. This time there was no darkness to hide behind, no power outage, no accident. I let him take it. This, he said. His fingers closed gently around mine, and maybe figuring out the rest without running away from it. I looked at our joined hands, then back at him. For 6 years I had believed the greatest risk was telling Ryan the truth. Standing beside him with the Atlantic stretching behind us, I finally understood something else. Sometimes the truth did not destroy what you already had. Sometimes it gave both people permission to discover what had been there all along. We stayed near the pier until the evening air turned cool, neither of us willing to let go first. Nothing dramatic happened after Ryan took my hand, and somehow that made the moment feel more real. We walked back toward the hotel slowly, stopping for takeout along the way and arguing about whether French fries counted as a complete dinner. The conversation sounded familiar, but the silence between our jokes had changed. Every few minutes, Ryan glanced at me and smiled as if he was still getting used to the possibility that he no longer had to hide what he was trying to understand. When we reached the hotel lobby, the clerk waved us over. Good news. A room with 2 beds opened up. I can move you tonight if you still want it. I looked at Ryan. Yesterday, that offer would have solved everything. Now he looked at me instead of answering for both of us. Your call, he said. That mattered. After everything, he was giving me a choice. I am fine where we are. Relief softened his face. He turned to the clerk. We will keep the room. Thank you. Upstairs, the pillow that had fallen during the night was still on the floor. Ryan picked it up, looked at the remaining divider, and smiled. Do we still need international borders? Depends. Are you planning another blanket invasion? I have changed. Since yesterday, personal growth can happen quickly. I laughed and helped him move the pillows back where they belonged instead of rebuilding the barrier. Later, we sat beside each other with the balcony door open, listening to the ocean. Ryan turned the faded blue bracelet around his wrist. There is something I need to say before we go home tomorrow. I waited. I still do not know what label fits me, he said. Maybe I will figure that out. Maybe it will take time. But I do not want my uncertainty to become another excuse for treating you like something I can only admit to in the dark. I felt my chest tighten. You do not owe me an immediate answer. I know. He looked at me. But I can give you an honest one. I want to try this. Slowly. With you. I smiled. Slowly sounds good. Ryan reached for my hand, then hesitated. Can I kiss you? 6 years of imagined versions of that moment disappeared because the real one was quieter and better. He had asked. He was giving me room to choose. Yes, I said. Our first kiss was brief and gentle, followed almost immediately by Ryan smiling like he could not quite believe himself. Well, he said. I laughed. That is all you have. I am processing important new information. Take your time. He squeezed my hand. I plan to. 3 months later, we drove back to the same stretch of Carolina coast. Ryan had reserved one room this time, deliberately, and showed me the confirmation with a grin before we even left home. By then, we were still learning what being together looked like, but the uncertainty no longer frightened either of us. That evening, we walked barefoot near the water as the sky turned pink and orange. Ryan still wore the blue bracelet I had given him 6 years earlier. You know what is funny? I said. What? I once told you that if somebody really loved me, I wanted him to bring me to the ocean. Ryan looked toward the waves, then back at me. Good thing I listen when you talk. I smiled and took his hand. For years, I thought loving my best friend meant protecting our friendship from the truth. I had been wrong. The truth had not erased the 8 years behind us. It had simply given us somewhere new to go together.